in actually retrieving these children and bringing them back home to the States from Lebanon.
It was extraordinary that we actually recovered these children. I prepare these cases pro bono. I don't charge a client to do these cases. There is no bar or lawyer out there that really knows how to cull out or go through the immigration, the international, the family law areas that this touches. The fact is, the State Department itself admits that there are over 1,000 reported cases per year of American children spirited away to other countries.
Countries that we have very limited success in getting these kids out of?
Well, we have a treaty called the Hague Convention where about 50 countries have agreed to work these things out. But that's only 50 countries out of hundreds of countries in the world. But the fact is, over 11,000 American-born children since the 1970s have been spirited away by a parent to other countries, countries that we barter tremendous deals with, military installations, commercial transactions, and the State Department and law enforcement, for the most part, look the other way. The agents in this case are to be commended. The Assistant U.S. Attorney is to be commended. The State Department is doing as good a job as they can. The fact is that Congress needs to give more laws and to legislate. These parents in cross-cultural relationships need to evaluate their vulnerabilities at an early stage. Mary and I met at a conference. It was Parent, headed by Maureen DeBa, who's also a parent whose child was taken. We met at this conference. She came over to me with a flyer that she had made and said, "My 3 children were abducted. Can you help me, Mr. Wilds?" My heart went out to her. You can imagine, after talk shows talking about this, the hundreds of calls that I receive. And the fact is that there is no system. Do they call the FBI? Do they call the National Crime of the National Center for Missing Children? Do they call the State Department Children's Issues Desk? Do you know what happens, Paula, when they call these people? Well, one agency says it happened, the crime in our state is the retention of children from outside. And since it's international, we can't help you. The FBI sometimes is tied because of their reach overseas, and the State Department will only give you a list of lawyers to deal with in other countries and conduct a welfare and whereabouts visit. That's not acceptable.
Mary, your children are now in your custody. How much do you fear that there's a possibility if your husband had access to these kids, he'd take them again?
That's a great concern of me. I would hope that that would never happen again, but it will always be a concern for me. For the rest of these children's lives until they're at least adults. I will always have to be careful.
Have you been threatened in any way because of the actions you took on behalf of your daughters?
I have not been threatened, no.
Did you have any concerns about your own personal safety as you worked so hard to get your children back from Lebanon?
That was a concern too. I really had to get to the point of realizing what a desperate measure this was by my husband to do this, and at this point I believe anything is possible. I cannot rule out anything ever.
Michael, in closing, parents often use their children as pawns during very bitter divorces. What is the lesson to be learned, in particular from Mary's story?
Again, parents in cross-cultural relationships need to determine their vulnerabilities at an earlier stage and take what action they can to protect themselves.
So what does that mean in Mary's case?
Well, it means in Mary's case that at a time where she was having difficulty with her husband, she should have taken some action or done some analysis as to whether or not she would be subject to some child abduction case. Consult with a lawyer. See a lawyer in another country. Look at relatives. Look at other people similarly situated. Look at yourself and preact, prepare yourself for this, rather than find out through war stories and attending conferences that you ended up in these shoes. The fact is that law enforcement, mayors in towns, I sit as a city councilman in my town, all local officials could warn people in cross-cultural relationships. Right now, Congress has a provision, a law, that might be passed, and we're hoping that it will pass, that will require the State Department to furnish copies of these reports, countries that have been deficient in returning children, and mandating local judges and lawyers to be aware of these circumstances. Congress has not risen to the level of scrutiny. Members of Congress call my office because they don't know how to deal with these kind of situations, and everybody, as sympathetic as they are, still does not take with the same zeal that Elian Gonzalez received in the last few months. And unfortunately, that case gave America a touch of a child in plight. Whether you feel that case ended up as a child abduction case or not, the fact that this was eventually resolved at the butt of a gun shows us that there's a need for more law.
Mary, last question for you. Are you confident that you'll be with your girls for the many, many months to come?
Oh yes, I am. I really am. We all feel we're back at home, and I believe that we have some tough issues to deal with because of what's happened, but we will be working on them, and we will be working on them together.
Do you girls feel safe?
Yes, they do. They're glad to be home.
All
That's
right.
what's important to them.
Well, we appreciate your joining us tonight and sharing your story with us, both Mary and Michael.
Pleasure.
Glad to have
Thank
you with
you.
us. We'll be right back.